afternoon, everyone. Hope you've all had a great day. Me, Mcevoy. I'm stood in the Senedd right now. There's a debate in the chamber. They're debating the lockdown, Drakeford's lockdown. I'm not allowed to take part in the debate. I've been banned from speaking by the presiding officer. She's basically doing a job for the Labour government. They don't want awkward questions asked. So I'm up here and I'm saying what I'd like to say instead of in the Parliament.
Tonight we have a special guest, Neil Mcevoy. I appreciate your time and the fact that you're still up today or tonight. And we are so excited because we've got a lot of questions for you that we're going to pepper you with. And we look forward to learning a little bit more about you and also learning about why you got started in the first place. So tell us a little bit.
I've always been interested in politics, really. Grew up, I suppose, would you call it a project over there in America? We call it a council estate here. And I suppose growing up, there was a huge lack of opportunity for people my age. Looked around the world. Margaret Thatcher was in power back in those days in the 1980s. I'm 50 years of age now, so getting on. And I just felt that I wanted to do something to make a difference, really. And got involved in politics at a very early age, 15. Went to university, was still very active in politics. Got involved in lots of community things. My first ever campaign really was an environmental campaign. And we managed to stop an incinerator being built in a local community, which was a big win at the time. So I suppose really I've always been a community activist, and the natural progression seemed to be into elected politics. And ended up getting in the Welsh Parliament in 2016. And that's really where life changed a hell of a lot, really. And it's just been a roller coaster. And I suppose I believe in what I do. We believe in what we do collectively. We've got a great number of teams. But I suppose I'm not really good at looking the other way when things are wrong. And I find it very difficult just not to stick up for people, really. I believe in solidarity, social solidarity. So if somebody's getting a kick in and if somebody is on the receiving end unfairly, then I'll get involved. It's just my nature, really.
It seems like it seems like that's what you're known for.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also known for being a bully.
I have heard that. I mean, maybe there's a story or two that goes around.
Oh God, well, it was, believe it or not, it started mainly in 2015. I attended an eviction, but I was trying to stop the eviction, really. And the city government were terrible. They were throwing the family out, and there was no need. I mean, there was really no need whatsoever. We lost that time in court. The city, to secure the eviction, they lied. And when I was outside, I said I couldn't wait to maybe get back into office. The way the system is, I was elected via proportional representation in 2016. The 2017 election was back to the city government, and my vote increased massively there. In 2016, I suppose people thought I was crazy because I said I could win, and I needed to double the vote to win. And I was up against the now First Minister, so maybe the president in the state, the governor maybe, and he was the health minister then. He was in charge of the health service, but I knew I could win, so I packed in. I had a word with the wife, and she wasn't my wife then, but we were engaged, and I asked her if I could take a year off work, which is quite a big thing to do, but I knew that if I didn't take a year off work and just focus totally on the campaign and go without money for a year, I wouldn't get elected. I'd come close, but I wouldn't get elected. So she agreed, thankfully, and I took a year off work, campaigned like hell for 12 months, and got elected, and almost beat the health minister in the it's called first past the post. I almost won that one. I lost out by just 1,000 votes, and we doubled the votes. So we did double it, but not quite enough, and that really caused a stir. No competition, no problem, and all of a sudden there's a competitor. and I suppose I've been singled out since then for a lot of attention, and some of it not very nice attention.
First Minister, in Cardiff West, the area you're supposed to represent, the countryside and green fields are currently being bulldozed to make way for expensive housing which most local people cannot afford. The developments will lead to at least 10,000 extra cars on the road every single day, and these roads are already rammed with lorries thundering through our communities. You have been a cabinet member since 2013, yet you've not been able to influence any change of Welsh Government policy to protect our communities from this environmental destruction. Well, as First Minister, there is no hiding place any longer, is there? So why are you sitting back and letting the green fields of Cardiff West be trashed by corporate developers?
Llywydd, I can assure the member that his contribution will be considered with all the seriousness it deserves.
Hwyr Anca Davies.
Diolch, Llywydd. It's a practice.
So your election and your job, your responsibility to your community, I mean, it's not without sacrifice, and part of that is your family. Tell us a little bit about
it's tough
how
on
that
the family.
balance works out for you.
Yeah, it's hard in the family. I mean, my parents are elderly now. I had a great upbringing as a kid. I mean, great mum, great dad. They both really hard workers. Instilled in me the need to be educated. Great sister. And it's tough because when a lot of smears are thrown my way. I mean, it's quite lots of gaslighting. It's very strategic in what they do. So it's very upsetting for the family to deal with that. It's upsetting for the wife. My wife is mistreated sometimes as well, especially by certain people in authority. Her life is made difficult. And my office was burgled as well. They went through 2 doors. They cut through steel bars. They cut through the window frame, and it was another information burglary. So there's quite a bit of pressure. Complaints are constantly made about me as well. This is tough, but it's part of a political strategy that we have in Wales, whereby if somebody doesn't conform, they have to be dealt with by the authorities, and the authorities have tried to deal with me. As of yet, they've been unsuccessful, and they were at it again on the weekend. On the weekend, with the police calling on the house, trying to give me a caution, which is basically a criminal record. They were trying to, if you accept a caution in the UK, then you accept being a criminal. You've done something wrong, and I wouldn't accept. I said I'd done nothing wrong, so I wouldn't accept the caution. I may well end up in court, which I look forward to, because I'll give my side of the argument. I did nothing wrong. All I did was give out a few leaflets. Because we're in lockdown, supposedly we're not allowed to do that.
So you've received a report from a member of the public, basically, that you and some of your party members might have been out dropping leaflets over the last couple of days in the Pentrevane and Caira areas. Does that ring any bells?
I'm trying to think what to say, really, because you guys are tweeting earlier that you were dropping leaflets, as in South Wales Police were dropping leaflets in Bridgend. So what's the difference between you dropping leaflets as police officers and me dropping leaflets as a member of the Senedd? And what time is it now, guys?
It is 8:25.
So it's 8:25 on a Sunday evening. My baby's in bed. My wife's in the background. So police, I'm videoing. And you are knocking at my door at this time, chasing up the fact that I'm delivering leaflets to constituents in my own constituency. This is an abuse of the democratic process.
Okay, it is in breach of the coronavirus regulations.
I disagree.
But it is, though. It's written
I
in
disagree.
law,
No, it isn't written in law. It's an interpretation of government advisors who work for Mark Drakeford. It's not law. I voted on this legislation. I did not vote to stop politicians delivering leaflets when an election has been called. This is... It's nothing to do with you. You've drawn the short straw to come here this evening. I understand that, but this is an abuse of the democratic process. I'm a democratic elected politician. I have been delivering leaflets. I'm not in breach of any regulations whatsoever.
I don't want to comment on that, but...
Well, that is the case.
This is the allegation that we've received today, okay?
As with all COVID breaches, we have to come and ask.
Well, there is no COVID breach. This is on video, Kevin. Do you mind? It's okay. Go to bed, love. It's all right, honestly.
Okay, Neil.
But this isn't this.
I wouldn't say
This
so.
is an invasion of my privacy. You've come here late on a Sunday evening. My baby's in bed. My wife's in bed. My wife is upset, as you can see, and it's an abuse of the democratic process. I've been investigated by you guys.
The wife doesn't appear visibly upset to me.
Well, she is upset. How do you feel, love?
Oh,
she
I'm
doesn't.
upset.
She doesn't look upset. Are you serious?
Beyond words.
She says it's beyond words, so I think she is upset.
Okay. Neil, all we're going to do today, okay,
Yeah.
is give you some advice that you should not be out dropping leaflets.
This is bordering on fascism. This is authoritarianism.
All I'm going to say now, Neil, is okay. This is going to be referred to the Joint Enforcement Team.
Refer it to them.
At Southwest Police.
Yeah.
I am going to caution you, okay,
Caution me for.
for a possible breach of coronavirus regulations.
Is it a
Not
breach or is
stated
it a breach or is it a
harm
possible
defence.
breach?
Do not mention now something which
Yeah?
is relying
Okay.
on, okay. So, like I said, it will be referred to the Joint Enforcement Team if they
Yeah.
consider that any action should be taken.
Yeah.
Based on our encounter today,
Yeah.
then they'll do so.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank you.
All the best.
It just so happens we've started a new political party called Propel, and it just so happens we want to shake up the Welsh establishment.
Neil, about that, this particular point is very curious for me because I live quite local to these activities, and I've never seen anything like this before. Not in my lifetime. I've heard of things in others. Maybe I've spent too much time in London and missed all the fun, but that it strikes me that by the police not enabling you to do your job in such fashion by delivering information to your constituents, under the threat of a caution, no less. I mean, is that not the very definition of a conflict of interest?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a member of the Welsh Parliament, but there are only 60 of us, but only one member of the Parliament has been prevented from working, and that's me. You see all the others on new media, around photograph opportunities, doing all sorts of things. But the police, it's the second time they've harassed me. They were harassing me 3 weeks ago as well. There's a part of Cardiff, believe it or not, where they want to demolish everybody's homes, okay? And then move them out, gentrify them, put in more expensive housing, and kill the community. So I went down to speak to them. First of all, I offered the local residents a meeting on Zoom. I thought, well, maybe that's more appropriate. And they said, well, they don't really do Zoom, and some didn't have computers. Lots of the elderly people are not online. And when I walked onto the estate, there was a police van. And I'm like, wow, are they for me? To be honest, so you hear from me?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. We've had basically information from shared services that what's happened is information has been seen, you putting out on Facebook and Twitter, that you're here, my understanding is you're here speaking to residents with regards to Channel View and etc. I understand with regard to the essential work, I totally understand that, but what we need to consider is there any other way that you can do this?
Absolutely not. No.
And make this safer?
I put on Twitter, on Facebook, that I will be outside. I'll be in the open air. Everybody was distanced around the corner. Everybody had masks on while I was speaking to them. So no, and I've got to be honest. I don't have to go at you personally. When I go around the estates and I see drug dealers driving round on electric scooters all over the place, taking the place over, I never see a policeman. And yet you guys have been sent here today to speak to me because I'm campaigning to stop residents having their houses demolished. It's an outrage. And to be honest, I feel extremely disturbed in a democratic sense. I'm elected to that parliament and I have every right to walk these streets and speak to people safely. And that's what I'm doing.
Where do you think that remit comes from? How do you think they are able to operate under that sort of conflict of interest? It's obviously with regards to leveraging orders. And the other part would be, does that play into... I believe you've recently held elections within the party for police commissioner. I mean, would that come under your new candidate's remit to sort out and investigate, or how do you see that playing out? The reasons why, and what solutions you might be able to actually offer?
it comes from the very top. The elected police commissioner is the boss of the number one police officer in South Wales. I believe that he's taken orders from him, and I believe he is not doing his duty because I think he's behaving politically. He even liked the negative tweet about me today, which caught my attention.
What you describe ties into sort of the modern state version of heresy, and that you're being condemned as a witch, and if the witch tries to protest the witch's heresy, then she's found to be a protesting witch. You see, the denominator remains the same. You're still a witch, one way or the other.
Thanks to social media, the public, we're able to present our case, and the public see a different side of it. And every time they try to take me out, it's failed and it's rebounded. That happened on Sunday with the police, but just after they put me through the mill, if you like, and then we had a local election with the council, and my vote went up massively. There was a politician called Carl Sargent. Matthew will know who I mean, and it all stemmed around him going out drinking with a bunch of people. Nothing was. The Bay is quite a small place. I think probably like most political places of intrigue are. In the July, nothing was said. There was no rumor. There was nothing said about any bad behaviour. Everyone was back in September. Nothing said. But through the August, nothing said. Through September, nothing said. October, nothing said. Until there was going to be a government reshuffle, and the First Minister, the former First Minister, was going to be leaving office, and he was going to be changing things around. Now, Carl Sargent was thought to be a threat. We had different politics. We didn't get on at all. But he was said to be a threat either to be the next First Minister or, maybe more probable, to organise the kingmaker who would be the next First Minister. And suddenly a load of complaints were made about him and sexual misconduct. It was very unspecific. The witnesses were anonymous. And what some people didn't realise was that the poor man had fragile mental health, and to cut an extremely tragic story short, he committed suicide. And
I remember that happening. It was a very big thing in Wales at the time, guys.
Yeah, and I cannot, because he was a huge political figure in Welsh politics, and I'm limited to what I can say, so I can't tell you what I actually know, because I'll be in serious legal trouble if I do tell you. But what I will say is that the Labour Party, that's the ruling party, and also Plaid Cymru, the opposition party, so-called opposition, they're not opposition really. I know that. So I was in Plaid, and I used to be told to be nicer to the government, more or less. And look the other way on. Honestly, I mean, I'd question the First Minister. I'd have him on the ropes.
Well, it's great when you're self-regulating, isn't it? I want to throw that point to Dan, because that Professor Brodie's is kind of his bag, this kind of thing. Dan, what do you think of in terms of the propaganda angle with regards to this kind of behaviour from government in closing ranks and messaging? I mean, is there anything behind that? Is it typical, or are we just guilty of it in Wales? What would Edward Bernays say about this?
Well, I'm coming to you live from Japan. It's early in the morning, and I'm just getting my wits about me. I haven't had my coffee, so I'm just trying to catch up on the story, what you've been describing so far, so much as I could discern. It seems as though, all appearances suggest a kind of a conspiracy of systemic proportions. And the question that I wanted to put to you was, do you see any way the present system of, I assume it's a representative democracy, can overturn the systematic marginalization of citizen voices and concerns?
Okay, we have an election, Dan, and without them fighting, we're taking the fight to them through new media. We're very community-based as well, and I think that's why they've imposed another 3 weeks of lockdown, because we can't get out there. We do a lot of work on the streets. We do a lot of work in the communities, and it suits the ruling party and the established parties to have us pending, if you like. So it's a deliberate strategy for them to try and win the election. But I'm optimistic that we'll win it by other means. We're just starting as well. We've only we haven't even, our name is Propel. It's not even official yet. This is the lack of democracy, which is, I think, right the way across the Western world now. And I think we're in historic times where things are changing. We applied to be a political party in December 2019. I won't go into all the details. They kept us waiting until the 15th of July 2020 to tell us that we were not allowed to have the name that we'd applied for. Initially, they said we could have it, and we're the only party in British political history to be taken off the register of parties without having done anything wrong. And so we've got a bunch of people, a very small bunch of people, maybe a dozen people, able to manipulate the democratic process. And what is really dangerous is when you start messing with democracy, you don't know what the consequences will be. And if people lose faith in the system, I mean, democracy is the best way to resolve differences in society. And when there's not a level playing field, when things are manipulated, we haven't got we're not even official yet, but we're weeks away from an election and we don't have an official party. We're still waiting to be allowed to call ourselves Propel now. We changed the name. I don't think they do anything about the name we have now because we already existed as an entity in 2018. So we will be allowed, I believe we will be allowed to compete in the election. But, listen to what I'm saying now. I've heard myself say that. And I'm like, wow, listen to what I've just said. If they will allow us to compete in the election, this is where we're at. If they will allow us to get into the election.
Is belief a big driver in this? Because it seems to me that the witch hunters had a remit for doing what they wanted, but it was based on belief. It wasn't based on any kind of like demonstrable science, even at the time, right? It was burn the witch, and it became an easy way to blame people and get people out of people's way. Now, do you think that's going on in the Welsh Parliament a little bit, Neil? Decisions are being made based on belief, remit, and agenda, rather than robust scientific inquiry.
I think decisions are being made on the basis of making money.
Really, that blunt?
Advancing careers.
I think if we were living in ordinary times in times past that seemed typical to us, when people talked about elections, I think most people had connected positive connotations with elections. But nowadays, it seems, at least over the past decade or so, the system seems to be so overtaken by corporate power, vested interests, that the managers of public perception have managed to shield the machinations that go on behind the scene, and shield these from the eyes of the public, and the public seems to be absolutely powerless to do anything in a democratic system.
I wouldn't say we're powerless. What we have is corporate authoritarianism, and I think what we have in this side of the water in Wales is an opportunity now. We're at a very volatile time in politics. People voted to leave the European Union, which it may not have been the best thing to do economically speaking. People want change, and I think people are starting to realise now that the status quo, what we have right now, is not good enough, and they're looking for change. What we want to do is fill that gap in the market and bring about change, because we exist absolutely to change the system. And we've got a list of policies. We've not agreed them yet. We will agree them soon. But one of the laws that we want to bring in, we're going to call it the Democratic Revolution Act. We want democratic revolution in Wales. And what is really exciting, we actually have the power to do it through our parliament. And there is such a democratic deficit here, and we're determined to give an option to the public. What we want to do is empower people, empower the public, and have referenda on a whole score of issues. We want to change the voting system as well, where it's proportional. We haven't really got that. It's part proportional, but it's not proportional enough. So there's so much we can do, and there's so much we can offer people out there in terms of change. And it's my job, it's our job to sell that to the public. I'm an optimist by nature. We're called Propel, and we have elections on the 6th of May, or maybe if not the 6th of May, they're going to be in the autumn. And there's nothing they can do with that. We will have elections. And what we're doing, we're campaigning hard, we're getting out there. To be fair, they've done us a favour on the weekend by sending the police around. We've got a lot of coverage on social media, new media, and we will get people elected. And we're going to get elected to that parliament, and we're not going to play. We're not going to play around. We're going to do a serious job. The following year, we have city elections. I know we can do really well in the city elections all across Wales. And what we're doing is building a citizens movement. We're not a political party. We're a social movement. And we're about getting things done. We're called Propel deliberately because that's a verb. It's a doing word. And propellers take you up, and propellers can also take you forward. And that's what it's all about. Yeah.
So you describe you used terminology, very specific terminology a few minutes ago. You said this seems like a psych-op. And it certainly does seem like a psych-op. It is sort of the other face of one of many methodologies that are utilized for scandalizing public officials who dare to step out of line, as it would seem you are doing. One of the standard is, of course, the honeypot.
Yeah.
Which doesn't have to lead to sexual relationships. It can be someone who befriends you that you can confide in under conditions of being psych-opt on the other side, which is what's happening to you. And so very often what happens is when someone incurs experiences like you, they're honeypotted on the other side, a confidant. Honeypot, the term usually is associated with sexual relationships, but it doesn't have to be. And so there's a confidant that suddenly materializes, in many cases more than one, who understands what you're going through, who wants to hear more from you about, which just draws you in even further. And so I take very seriously what you're describing. I'm very familiar with this in my own study of it, and my sort of writing around these topics of what we called under the rubric state crimes against democracy, practices very like what you described would fit there, which is the systematic subversion of democratic institutions, and through any means necessary. And of course, psychological operations are the standard maneuver for, again, what is called, Peter Dale Scott calls deep state institutions. So, how deep the deep state goes is matter for science fiction, beyond the kind of inference, because there's only so much we can know. It's like black holes. It's difficult to where you can't find the perimeters of them. It's difficult to know where they are. But what you describe is very much like that. I just want to speak out to affirm this. And then I would ask, so, what's next? It seems like they are, to use another a popular American sports idiom, a full court press is what they're putting on you. That you can't get the ball back in bounds to play politics because you're full court press. They're keeping you from even throwing an inbound pass. And that's, I'm sorry to go on, but
no. I'm just going to say, to add to that, I've actually been banned from asking questions in the Parliament, and every time I put an amendment, this is the Welsh democracy. Every time I put an amendment forward, it's dismissed. It's not accepted. Emergency questions are dismissed. But I think I've made light of some of the stuff there because it's quite funny, really. But some of the stuff we've been uncovering is pretty serious, and some of the things we've been fighting. I mean, for example, the nuclear industry is a massive lobby, and we've been fighting the UK government, the Welsh government, EDF, the electricity company. They're constructing a new nuclear power station in England, right on the estuary, next to the coast, on the coast. And as part of the construction, they have to dig out hundreds of thousands of tons worth of mud. And 3 years ago, they dumped 8,000 tons a mile outside of our city, capital of Wales, Cardiff. It was dispersed in the estuary, went everywhere, and it wasn't tested for plutonium because they said they didn't need to test for plutonium. Okay. When it gets really serious is we uncovered documentation to prove that the reactor had dripped plutonium into the estuary for decades. So much so, in fact, they stopped testing for it. They wanted to come back.
You're talking about this information coming back from professors with bona fide credentials in the field as well, aren't you?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
This isn't tinfoil hattery. This isn't conspiracy. No. It's working theory based on evidence.
So, and what our study showed, if you now look at the picture, sorry, you've got the black and white version. This sharp peak in around 88, 89, that what I've got in red here, that very sharp peak is the amount of plutonium that was discharged from Hinkley Point A in a given year.
Yeah, they did call us conspiracy theorists, but we've done it through science, and it's a standard trope now. It's a standard insult, the conspiracy theorist. But Professor Keith Barnum, probably the most eminent academic on weapon-grade plutonium in the UK, great reputation.
If not widest, yeah.
Yeah, I mean everywhere, worldwide. But he uncovered a paper which proved that plutonium had leaked into the estuary for decades. We presented that to the public. The Russia Today covered it. Great, fair play to Russia Today.
Campaigners are demanding transparency over plans to dump more mud from Hinkley Point nuclear power station in Somerset into the sea near Cardiff.
BBC wouldn't. They covered it in a very light-hearted way. So the Welsh media basically ignored it and made light of it. I mean, unbelievable, because they wanted to dump a further 800,000 tonnes. Okay, so I've been, believe it or not, the only politician in Wales fighting that. Can you believe that? I mean, it's incredible.
Well, I can, because I happen to post a lot about your activities before our paths crossed in the Frog group for a number of years on this matter. Okay. So the Frog membership are quite familiar with what's been happening with Geiger Bay, as it was branded, and I couldn't quite believe it at the time, and now I can believe it even less hearing you talk about it. It's quite astounding, the behaviours.
I'm serious.
My question is this kind of fascist decorum something that goes back in history in Welsh or otherwise British politics? Because this is fascism by I was thinking, well, this is this kind of soft fascism, liberal fascism, which is the scorning of people and marginalizing them by media operatives, and sort of denunciation and neutralization by headline and formalistic rules of censure, all of which is based on at best hearsay, disagreements, and like what you described in the more nefarious, operatives are anonymous, but we discover they actually work for the propaganda firm behind this.
I think these problems are endemic in many places, but in particular in Wales, it's one party which has won all the elections in Wales for 100 years. So you have, they're the people able to give out money, they're the people to give favour. If you want a career, you join that party, and you control them. And it's what you have. It's almost like a Sovietization. It's almost like living in a mini East Germany, if you like. It's the problem.
It's a company town. It's a one company town.
Yeah,
it runs the whole thing.
First of all, we need to improve the Welsh Parliament so it is a bloody parliament instead of a playground. We get, ridiculous things happening, like what's happened to me and others. But we need to improve the Welsh Parliament. But what we want as time goes by, when we have a better calibre of politician, when we have a better democratic track record, we want more powers in the Parliament, and ultimately, I want my Parliament to be sovereign. Okay, what we want is a sovereign Wales making our own decisions. mostly we'll probably share things, and work with England and Scotland and Ireland and so on. But we need to have the democratic right to decide for ourselves. And look at the United States of America. Every state's got a constitution. We haven't. I mean,
so is it a more federal model that you're talking about, or is it a move towards common law? Because I hear, I mean, we're both in the UK, and between the two of us, we've been exposed to the history of, there was a Welshman, an Englishman, and an Irishman walk into a bar. We know the culture behind the four nations, and the strife and the challenges and the competition between them, and it's all tongue in cheek most of the time. But I'm hearing a real frustration with the ivory tower kind of mentality you get from London. And is it more about insulating Wales, or just simply having the opportunity in Wales to move more towards a federated common law model?
Opportunity. It's for people to have economic opportunity in Wales, to have political opportunity. London's a different country. I mean, I don't blame people up there. The whole UK economic policy is run for the southeast of England. That's just the way it is. So it's our fault.
I worked there for 10 years, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, London is a microcosm, unfortunately. So, like Geneva or, Frankfurt, same sort of thing.
It's a great city, and I want Wales to be a great country. And it's about giving people confidence, inspiring people to want a better future. We've got a great history as well, and we in our country, we need to remember the history we've got. Because if you look at law, there was Hywel Dda, which was Hywel Good, and this was roughly in the 1100s. No, what am I talking about? Sorry, it was the 10th century, the 900s, and we had a legal system written in Wales, and it was everything was there, and it was a very progressive legal system. Actually, it was very egalitarian. Women were very empowered, and it wasn't until the Normans came and conquered Wales that they imposed common law, where women then became vassals of men, and at that time, because that was their Norman culture, which later became mixed with the Anglo-Saxons, and there you had English. Actually, in terms of matter of fact, the English language was not spoken in the English Parliament until the 1400s. It was French up until that point. That was the language of the conquerors.
Fascinating.
In Wales, we've got the oldest living language in Europe. I mean, dwi'n hoffi, dwi'n dwlu siarad Cymraeg, fy Nraig and siarad Cymraeg fel iaith cyntaf. So it's just language thousands of years old. But my wife speaks Welsh, and Welsh is her first language.
If you don't speak Welsh, are you less Welsh than an English speaker?
No. Because people I've learned Welsh as an adult, because when I grew up, this was the colonised mind. I thought that Welsh was a foreign language. Now, wait there. Bear with me. I live in Wales, okay? The historic language of the country is Welsh, and I thought that Welsh was a foreign language. Because I grew up in Cardiff, where English, and not many people spoke Welsh. But that's the way the UK conditioned me to think. And it's not the UK. I say the UK to be polite. What I should be saying is England, really, because we see the reaction in Scotland now. Scotland are going to be an independent country in the not too distant future, and I mean, we've got a country to recreate. We've got great traditions. There's a real, dynamic entrepreneurialism in Wales, which had a massive social conscience in the 19th century, where you had miners and build. They would educate themselves. They would build theatres. They would build libraries, because they'd all pool their wages together. There's a great entrepreneurial spirit in Wales, which we've forgotten. Because we've had this one party dominating us for 100 years, and we're going to change that. And that's what they're frightened of, and that's why people like me have the lives that we have at the moment.
Well, it's interesting that you quite a lot of history there. Fascinating stuff. I mean, to those that say that, even cherry picking or taking the best bits or evolving the best bits of something that we had 900 years ago is that not a step backwards rather than a step forwards? Because there are similar models around. I believe California is one of them.
Well, I think what I'm saying is you don't go right. You wouldn't have the same laws, but what I'm saying is we were developed enough all that time ago to have a fully functional legal system. You had Owain Glyndŵr, who was a great revolutionary, a reluctant revolutionary, in fact, in 40. He created, when they defeated the English back then 600 years ago, but he created a parliament, which was where people were elected to. That was revolutionary at the time, and it was the back in the 10th century. It was the gender equality that existed in Wales, which was then forgotten when the invaders came. I mean, there's a whole history to remember there, but not to go back. We have to go forward. And I want a constitution, like you guys, and like you guys watching America. You're lucky you've got a constitution. We haven't. It's just they make it up as they go along. And what I want a constitution. I want a bill of rights. I want freedom of speech, which is enshrined in law, because that's massively under attack now. We do not have freedom of speech any longer here in the UK. And I want a law giving me the right to have freedom of speech. And there's a lot to do.
So in terms of constitutional matters, I mean, modern issues that could be considered for inclusion in a Bill of Rights, in a constitution, in a modern nation looking to develop in a modern way, especially when you're talking about, digital development and the digital landscape and the infrastructure required to run that. What do you think of data? I mean, in terms of the sovereignty that you outline, do you think people should own their own data, or do you think that the people they interact with would be able to harvest their data on their behalf?
I think data is a massive concern, the way the corporations predict your behavior with everything they know about you. We're on a very dangerous path at the moment where the oligarchs know more about us than we know about ourselves. I think people should own their own data. I think also that data should be wiped at a certain point unless you request to keep it, because especially in politics, you see things coming up, and if somebody said something when they were 15 on social media, or they've been filmed doing something when they were 17, they said something outrageous at the time, and then 20 years later, it's still there.
Well, this has a lot of cultural aspects as well as technological. I mean, have you heard of the Jericho Forum?
Sorry?
Have you heard of the Jericho Forum?
No.
They attempted a project whereby they tried to subvert the VeriSign Nominet indexing and nomenclature of the internet. So this was all about enabling anybody who uses the internet to essentially chmod their own data. So your medical records, your bank records, your credit card numbers, all these would be able to be activated in terms of read-write change, right? So you'd be able to enable Amazon, for example, to access your credit card details so that you could pay for stuff, but not access them without your permission and not change them without your permission. Or you could select all three, so Amazon could absolutely edit all that data on your behalf, right? But the point was that the individual could enable the client or the entity that they wanted to interact with to do whatever the user wanted, and not to have to sign up to some kind of very in-depth, complicated terms of service, which robbed the user of rights that they wanted to keep. But they couldn't then interact with the client because they had to sign up to the TOS. And the Jericho Forum got as far as they had a server in the States, one in South Africa, one in Sweden, and the States, Washington quickly killed the one behind the data harbor, then lobbied the South African government and killed that one, and Sweden came under financial pressure because of the backers, because the other two had gone, so that the project failed. But what you've got now is you've got Tim Berners-Lee coming back with Web 2.0 and a new HTML format through his new company Inrupt, where Inrupt is the entity which owns the technology and develops the technology. And he's working with MIT to essentially try and achieve the same thing, but 20 years later. So through Pod and Solid, any individual could have their information pod, which is secure and theirs to control. And through Solid, that's the development platform that organizations, websites, anybody that person wants to interact with can develop a part of their website to interact with the user using pod. Why not extend that to government? So you've got the sovereign data of any given individual, in this example in Wales, and the technological means to actually, for the individual, to allow government to know stuff about them, including which way they would vote, for example. And that would form kind of a secure basis to directly interact with a market of 1 or a market of 3 million on any given issue.
Yeah. I think what you're talking about there is fascinating. I'd like to digest it really, and what I'd like to do here is what other people are doing actually in terms of setting up a convention. And I think all these things you're describing there should be fed into the convention. And I don't mean a convention of the great and the good. I mean a real people's convention, so we can think about what kind of country we want to have, what kind of constitution, what will it mean. And those people in areas like you're talking about with far greater expertise than me, I think you put forward these ideas and develop them, because individuals need to be sovereign. And what this COVID crisis has taught us, taught me anyway, is how the state can be misused. I mean, I never thought I'd be living in a country where you're not even allowed to go out and buy a pint now. It's shocking. A pint of beer, can't do it. Everything's locked down without good reason, really now. So there's a lot to do, and I think maybe I'd like to chat to you again, Matt, off air in more depth about what you mean there, because it's certainly very, very interesting.
By all means, yeah, I'd be happy to. And the guys here as well, different aspects of it. We've talked about that particular issue quite a bit in this organisation, because that's something that we're working towards. I mean, that's just one example. I mean, this digital revolution and the parameterization that you offer with regards to a sovereign development on the digital side, for me personally, is equally fascinating, because
I want to circle back around a little bit with the idea of sovereignty and an agency of a voice. And I wanted to get your take, Neil, on the individual's right to exercise individual choice, especially during a pandemic when we are compelled, or the established media provides compelling arguments for us to jab ourselves. What do you believe?
Well, clearly, COVID's. I think back in March, I very much favoured lockdown. I thought in Wales we should have had a tougher lockdown and much shorter. We didn't really. We had the of both worlds. There was no policy of actually trying to stamp out the virus. First of all, clearly, people say it doesn't exist. Clearly, the virus exists. I know people who've died from the virus, who are at the end of their lives, to be frank. And I think what has happened with COVID is that they got it wrong. And I think the PCR testing has been taken as gospel, and we now know that is certainly not the case. And here in Wales, the policy of locking down for such a long time is disastrous. And we're going to be facing, I'm very vocal now on wanting to come out of lockdown, which is upsetting some people, it's pleasing others. But I mean, we're facing a medical tsunami of things which are just not being done now. Cardiovascular disease, cancer. I mean, scans are not happening. Chemotherapy is being delayed. I mean, this is serious stuff. The economy is crashing. And at the moment, some people are in a protected bubble, almost, in the public sector and in government, because we still get our salaries every month. And there's a lack of contact with reality, I would say, here. I think you guys over there are doing it slightly differently. But the COVID certainly did exist to a large extent earlier last year. We saw the pictures, and so I supported the lockdown then. But I think we're way past the point where the lockdown is useful, and where we're at now is that civil liberties are being massively infringed, and
can you see it continuing?
Yeah.
For how long? You know, where's the horizon?
But for me, the horizon's on May the 6th. We have an election. We're the only party offering to, well, not offering, letting saying we will come out of lockdown, and crucially, we will not be going back into lockdown. And I think the other parties have a problem there, because what they will have is we will have a relaxing of lockdown as we go along. So people will feel a bit better about things, and they'll hope that everyone's forgotten all about the last 12 months. But then I think after that, they'll retain the legislation to do what they want. And what we want to do is get elected and repeal the legislation. Throw it out. It's been abused terribly. And what we need to do is get back to making our health service work for us. And we've got to get out of lockdown. There's a massive urgency. So in the early days, I did see the value in locking down for periods that went on for far too long. And ultimately as well, if you look at the how lethal COVID is, initially we were told it was the second plague, basically. Everyone was frightened. Everyone thought if you got COVID, it would be terminal, and that's just not the case. I mean, it's very, very nasty and dangerous for categories of the population. My mum and dad, for example, mid-80s, obviously you get to that age with other health concerns. If they had the virus, it'd be pretty serious. But
so, how do you think this is happening? Because I know you've engaged with Dr. Mike Yeadon, because I watched what I thought was a very good Anna Brees interview, and it was mentioned there, and something you also mentioned, not only in that but in the past, was the low confidence decisions being made in the Welsh Parliament based on somewhat irregular scientific advisory. Who are these advisors? You know, why can't I see them? Where is the list of government advisors? Why can't I appraise who they are, their credentials? You know, why are they being listened to? And it seems to me a plethora of expertise, not only in Wales, not only in the UK, but globally, which are counter to that narrative, are ignored. I mean, where are those decisions being made? Are they being made in chambers? And by who?
I think what you have out there through, I mean, in our culture, we don't really do death very well. It's not something that we really embrace, and having death figures on your TV every single day is shocking. And in 2018, there was a huge flu epidemic, and tens of thousands of people died. No one was aware of it because the media didn't tell us. But now, every single day, it's being rammed down our throats. Also, you have the misrepresentation of figures. You have the misrepresentation of tests. And let's not forget that some people are making a hell of a lot of money out of this. I mean, in the UK, because the Welsh government gave away its authority to act over tests. They gave it back to Westminster. And it's a private company running the tests. So every PCR test they do, they get paid for it. I spoke to somebody earlier on, actually, and they had COVID for 2 weeks, tested positive. Before they were coming out, well, they had 3 tests. So he had COVID, was tested, he had COVID, he was ill, he said he was very ill, but he was one of the worst flus he's had. Okay, he was very, very ill. Then he was better, but he was told they were going to have another test to confirm he was better. So 2 weeks later, he tested positive. Okay, he spent a month in isolation, and I mean, clearly those tests were wrong. One of the tests was wrong. And what they do with the cycles, we all know now, the amount of cycles which they put the test through, they're not accurate. They cannot be relied upon. But our whole policy in Wales is driven by tests which we're now told are not accurate.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Everything that you've been describing, we see it too on this side of the planet. It seems to me that all of these plays in this big theater illustrate what the overlords of transnational finance and industry are saying about the Great Reset. Everything that we're seeing, how the media across the world are framing the problems, suggests that these are typical. These acts and plays are typical of what people who are advocating for the Great Reset suggests. It suggests that economies, must be brought down, that the sovereignty of people, our agency and our autonomy of communities and societies and nations, all of these things must be brought down in the interest of resetting the global economy and moving the world toward the fourth industrial revolution. So these stories about the PCR tests and using the PCR, which is clearly not adequate to find this so-called virus. All of these chinks in the armor of the story, the official narrative, they seem to indicate that there's a systemic problem across nations. And we're seeing it everywhere, that people in power are completely irrational and interested only in pursuing policies that support the official narrative. So we can see, all these indicators are signs that the sovereignty of citizens, of human beings, of societies, communities need to be weakened in the interest of the Great Reset. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make.
I think a lot of that I wouldn't. You said it was a so-called virus. I disagree. The virus is real. It's there. It's been dealt with here very badly. The government's own. What concerns me is the lack of information. And for example, I asked the government on the 20th of October what assessments they'd done prior to going into lockdown as to what would lockdown entail, what were the pros and cons, what were the costs of lockdown. And they hadn't done any assessments, clearly, because we don't have any figures yet. I did have, the answer from the government was, we'll reply to your question in more detail, and we will put the letter on the internet. Okay, that was the 20th of October. I mean, what kind of answer is that from a government? I just don't know. So we put in some more questions in January, and we got some answers back and some research. And what was really interesting, what Matt said earlier with the research, was that the measures taken, closing gyms, okay, so places where people can become healthy, where people can exercise safely, where there's no evidence of any large-scale transmission at all, minute transmission, and so they closed all these places down. They closed outside restaurants down. Why? I just don't know. With their own advice, they say that they have low confidence in those measures having any real effect, and so they don't even believe in what they're doing themselves. And what was interesting in the data they gave us was the Office for National Statistics had a bit in there, and they were quite openly saying that the morbidity rates, basically the amount of years lost through lockdown, the amount of years lost through lockdown will be greater, far greater than the amount of years lost through COVID or potentially lost through COVID, and which is why I'm arguing strongly that we've got to come out of lockdown. And I think that there is a mass hysteria. There is an illogical reaction to a threat, to a fear of the unknown, and panic never does anybody any good. But I've just talked to you about a bunch of politicians who were quite happy to have mud laced with plutonium dumped on them. So it doesn't surprise me that they've made really bad decisions. So in terms of taking things step by step, as I've tried to do, my job is to tell people what is going on. My job is to prove that the government policy is wrong. And my other job is to make sure that people vote for us and we get this country out of lockdown. Because whatever other countries are doing in Europe, if we do something differently, then that's really important. And I think we could lead on it. It's certainly in the United Kingdom, because everyone's accepting lockdown as the conventional wisdom. Ironically, against the advice of organisations like the World Health Organization. And what we have here is a media that just don't report things. And the best kind of journalism now is citizen journalism. So I was on with Anna Brees the other day, and she does tremendous work and covers really important things, because the established media doesn't work anymore. I mean, I think they're sort of glorified bloggers, really, who just want to get hits on the website rather than journalists who want to look into things and evidence things and actually dig into stories. The media's changed, and I think we need to. Where it's at now is on new media, which is why I'm able to sit here now. It's why I'm elected. If there wasn't new media, I wouldn't be a politician. They wouldn't let somebody like me in the office. Joking, no chance.
Do you think that is a real opportunity to? Because you strike me as somebody with an element of brevity. Come straight to the point, and I've heard you say that you've made mistakes. I mean, out loud and in front of everybody.
Yeah.
This surprises me, because I haven't heard a politician say that for up until probably last Tuesday.
we all make mistakes, and you've got to learn from your mistakes. That's the key point. And the way I was brought up, when you do something which is maybe when you fall, but you may not want to fall below standards. You may not mean to fall below certain standards. When you do, you've got to hold your hand up. And when you have got it wrong, you've got to learn from that experience. And while I said I did wrong, was I voted for the COVID legislation. I bitterly regret that now. I deeply regret it. At the time, I think I was caught up in everything with everybody else. My gut instinct was I didn't like the legislation. I didn't like the powers that we were giving away to the states. I didn't think we'd see the abuse of power as we're seeing now, where the police, if they want to kick my door in now and walk in Wales, they're allowed to do it by law. I mean, I really regret going along with that. I mean, I'm always a person that sort of is not frightened to be the only person. If you look at the record, quite often I'm the only person voting against certain things.
More power to you. The fact that you've changed your mind and backed it up, as you have changed your mind, is admirable. What about your colleagues? Are you finding that there's a growing number of your colleagues that are coming around or changing their minds as well as you, or is it the same usual suspects every time?
Usual suspects. I mean, 5 out of 60.
I don't want to lose the opportunity here. It's a wonderful one with the portrait you furnish us, Neil, of heretic's a terrible word, but the gadfly and sort of a Socrates maybe. And your refusal to accept the state party line. Ever since 9/11, there's been an incredible freezing of our capacity. that for, you know, under the banner that we were to protect the people from terrorists, you know, the censorship of speech, policing of any deviation from the safe speech. And Socrates was unsafe speech. This is what he spoke back to the state. But we have this has been coming now for 2 decades, and sort of culminating with this sort of trope of the bullying, you know, and that you know Trump was this incredible avatar of in the United States, so perfectly described. That he was a bully, that he was you know, that he was a throwback, and that he was you know, and then he summoned the vast army of the unwashed, of the deplorables in the liberal speak of you know, Hillary Clinton. But this what you're giving as a portrait of Neil, it reminds me very much, it brings so much back to mind for me of what's been going on now for quite some time in the United States, this policing of speaking out. Since that event, the 9/11 incident, which is incredibly murky incident, if you want to talk science and the how real science cannot substantiate the official story. And so, you know, there has been this straitjacket around questioning, very like there was a straitjacket of questioning in the 60s following the Kennedy assassination. There's the state shuts down the inquisitive. It shuts down and polices so vigorously the inquiry. Now, you refer to corporate authoritarianism, which is a species of fascism too, right? It has those features. And I really appreciate your optimism and your can-doism, and you're so very articulate and also very theoretical in how you size up the parameters of the state. It's so impressive. I wish you the very best. I hope that we continue to keep track of you here with Frog and otherwise, because what you're doing is incredibly important.
Yeah, you know, we're going to give it a crack. I'll be fighting until I've got the last breath in my body. Giving up is just not in my DNA. So it's not in my family's DNA. And brought up in, you know, in a tough area really, and those in the parliament, you know, they try and bully everyone. I did a speech, a court type of speech about 2 years ago, and I called them Z-class bullies because that's what they are. I mean, and the whole project of what we want, the whole thing of what we must do through Propel is bring change. And this may sound really just like sort of trite. Just want a bit of fairness, you know. Want a bit of equal opportunity. We want people to be able to work hard and succeed in life, and things not to be rigged against them. So with Trump, I think when people want to insult me here, they call me, you know, the Welsh Trump, which I find ironic. So I haven't got any money. You know, I spend all my money on politics. You know, but it's
neither is he apparently.
This is also part of what you referred to earlier of the categorizations that liberals are fond of. The
illiberal
categorizations, the multicultural categorizations, which what that has done, and it's been very engineered, is that we can't speak about class issues.
No, I mean,
we cannot speak those because we're insensitive to someone's feelings about being left out.
I look down on him because I am upper class.
I look up to him because he is upper class. But I look down on him because he is lower class. I am middle class. I know my place.
Talking about people's identities is a way of not talking about the people as such.
Yeah. What I find, what is shocking for me is they call me a populist. In terms of elections, it's my job to be popular, not a populist. So when you're popular, you get people vote for you. But I just, if you follow my social media feeds, if ever you're interested, it's all there for the last 5 years, basically. And you see the kind of issues I take on. I suppose really, I am academic in a sense, because I always have been academic. I like analysing things. I like reading. I speak 4 languages. I've got a postgraduate qualification. I used to be a teacher. I've taught all that. So I've got that academic background, if you like. But in terms of the politics, we don't look at it academically, in a sense. We look at things practically. How can we change people's lives? How can we improve standards of living? How can we help people with their problems? More to the point, how can we help them help themselves with issues? And how do we make our society better for our children? And that's why I'm in politics. And you said about Socrates, but I ain't going to be drinking any poison anytime soon. We're in here to fight. And what we have here is the age of illiberal liberals. I mean, they're not even left wing. I mean, they've forgotten all about class politics. The left is not the left anymore. I just find them very superior. A bunch of middle class, generally pretty well off people who, like the First Minister, he's on the hard left apparently in Wales. He lives in a £1 million house. He's a millionaire. He's got 2 houses. He's got one at the back as well.
I thought he lived in a shed.
Well, yeah, he told me we gotta have a go at him on that, because he told me that he lives in a shed, right? I got the bloody
shed on his allotment,
It's
growing his potatoes.
It's a coach house. I got the planning application, so we'll go on that one.
It's on Cathedral Road, isn't it?
Yeah, it's worth $1 million, whereas my house is worth nowhere near that. But I mean, to be serious, you got these politicians. So you got him, Mr. Millionaire. You got the others, like you got the goddess of the left, the anti-capitalist, Leanne Woods. Her and a partner got 3 houses. They rent 2 of them out in the private sector, but they're anti-capitalist. Okay, fair enough. And you got all these other politicians who only 4 houses, 3 houses, and yet I had a debate in Parliament where I wanted my neighbours literally to be able to buy their own home. Okay, they're paying rent. Many people are paying rent to the either the city government or the housing associations, which are private entities which own housing and rent it out to people. I suppose projects, as you say in America. And I want people to be able to buy their houses. Okay, and the so-called left, all those people with all those bloody properties between them, passed the law to stop working class people owning their own property. So you can no longer buy these properties now. You've got to pay rent for the rest of your life. So your kids will not get any inheritance from the property because you don't own it. So it's a gross inequality. It's an extension of inequality. It's an increase of inequality. And these middle class, wealthy lefties just don't get it because they're not actually very left wing. They've forgotten all about class politics, and all they go on about is issues of identity. And if you're like me with a mixed background, working class, and you don't fit into their boxes, then they pretend you don't exist and they exclude you.
Yeah, Matt Witt and I had a long conversation it's a while ago. I don't know if you remember, Matt, with regards to the institutionalized racism and the aspects of that Neil's talking about.
Well,
and I was trying to get that point across, and I don't think I did it as succinctly as you just did.
People don't want to hear about racism. They really don't like to hear that. People get very defensive, and I think because when I mentioned it the other night on Anna Brees, people were like more, I suppose, traditionally on the right were saying, "Well, it doesn't exist," and you're more fortunate because you're not white, and actually it does exist. But what we have to realize is that every single one of us has a prejudice. It doesn't. It depends what it is.
It's the way we talked, Matt, months and months ago about what I'd call the weaponization. The weaponization and the reverse. Let's put it this way: there's the capitalization of racism, and there's a weaponization of it. So in the United States history, the capitalization of it, in a big way, happened through various epochs. I don't want to lecture you guys; you're all plenty well educated. But one epoch that really was very well suppressed was housing. Like what you're describing, Neil, but in the United States, mortgages were not given to black families in sort of legions systematically because the state got in the business of backing mortgages with state insurance, the federal insurance policy, and on the grounds that integrated neighborhoods were a risky investment. once the United States government got in behind the insurance, we institutionalized the practice of segregated neighborhoods. Now you create neighborhoods that are segregated, and you create neighborhoods that have equity stakes that are asymmetric and inverse. And so that's the monetization of racism. The weaponization of it is the reverberation, where you get called a populist and a Trumpist, and you get banned by someone who's oh so woke because of nothing to do with anything she actually thinks, but by virtue of what she can project. And this is becoming rife in the last couple of years through U.S. institutions of higher education, the sort of condemning of people for whiteness, and they're looking around their shoulder. Are you talking to me? Because I don't think of myself, I am myself have been a theorist of all sorts of race stuff, written about it, stuck my neck out at the academically on campus, and I'm painted in the corner of being racist because of an incident that happened on campus that had nothing to do with race and everything to do with power intrigues. So but this is rampant, and there is this artifact though of absolutely institutionalized, monetized racism. Where the equity stake people have in housing for decades and decades has been embargoed according to race in the United States. There's no question that this has happened. It perpetuates. So when we talk, racism, we have to be more specific than, to your point, everyone's prejudiced. Everyone could be a hater, ignorant, whatever. But not everyone, not anyone, just anyone can deploy mechanisms against people. But the pretense now with the weaponization of wokeness is that just by virtue of a white person showing up, they're oppressing some. This is so patently absurd. But because we don't talk about the class terms, we don't talk about the monetization of racism, which liberals participated in as much as conservatives ever did. That we don't talk about the fraud perpetrated by the political class against everyone, beginning with a separation of neighborhoods in the United States in a big way in the sort of second deconstruction of Reconstruction. It's something that can't be spoken about. So then all of a sudden out of the woodwork, it would seem, but it wasn't out of the woodwork, it's been decades in the making, is the multicultural woke trope that is extraordinarily Orwellian.
What I was saying there about the everyone having prejudice, but the woke don't accept that because they're virtuous, and they're actually more, in my life experience, they're far more prejudiced than most people. It's actually, when I'm racially insulted openly, I find it more refreshing than the very real and insidious racism that I face in the Parliament. But they divide it up into the good and the evil, and those nasty racists over there, all the projection. But what we need to do is actually just be honest and more logical about our own weaknesses, our own prejudices, and then learn from that.
That it's the woke spoke crap, and also you talk about populism, because populists emerged in, I don't know about you guys, it emerged as a party platform that had the potential for a real threat to the major parties in the 1890s United States. And it came out of this agricultural populism, which was reacting very much in ways like, Neil, what you speak of as your platform, which is to restore sovereignty, to Matt's word, sovereignty to the little people. So the populist movement was that. And then it got very fractured, and it got taken over, and it got psychologically operationalized too. The agent provocateurs to disrupt what was happening with populism, what was happening with the movement for the single land tax. These things posed serious threats to the system, and they had to be subverted. They had to be pilloried. They had to be scandalized, and that is what happened. One of the major leaders of the party was scandalized then as a white supremacist. And this utterly fragmented there's a major shutdown of the populist movement in the United States 120 years ago. So it's a great tradition to be part of, but they associate the populist with the other modifiers, the demagogue, populist demagogue.
Oh yeah, yes, of course, yeah.
This gets back. This goes way back to the rabble rousing of labor of working class charismatics who have tried to summon that voice, and when they are show any signs of being successful, they get got. You get on the radar, and they're going to keep coming after you. Neil, they are going to keep coming after you.
Well, the biggest barrier is class. I mean, in terms of inequality, and I'm actually very proud of my race, and that's the human race. More or less, what Rosa Parks said that, didn't she? But yeah, they can carry on. They can carry on. Whatever. We're building a movement, and we'll take them on.
Neil, what are the goals for the coming election, and what drives them?
What drives them is inequality, injustice. I mean, because that just described to you there a mini confrontation, probably a million microaggressions from me projected upon certain individuals. But the drive from that comes from inside, and it comes from what I absorb. And I'm ashamed to live in Wales in 2021, knowing what it's like now. I had no idea until I got elected to the Parliament. I had no idea how bad things were. It's absolutely scandalous what is going on. So we absorb all these. Not only me, all of us now in Propel, and we absorb all these injustices. And do you know what? We've got to do something about it. And I'm not living in a Wales like this. I'm not. And we're going to fight. We're going to do something about it. We're going to organise all those people out there. We were organising these parents on social media now. We've got a really good closed group, and the parents are supporting each other. It's got its own organic life now. Leaders are emerging in the group and helping other people. It's a really good community thing. And so in terms of the goals of the election, it's to win as many votes, as many seats as possible. And ultimately, we want to be in government because we want to change our country. And what we want to do is live in a just society. I mean, I just cannot. I had no idea how bad things were until I got elected, and then I suppose became a figure that people would graduate towards. And in the last 4 years, we've had roughly 1,500 cases come through my office. We've dealt with. Some of them are ongoing, but we've just done an immense amount of work. It's like the office is like a train station sometimes before lockdown. We have an open door policy, so if you have you may just need a new radiator. Maybe you should have one. You've not had one. You may have lost your children. Whatever the case is, they know they can come in the office, tell us what it is, and we'll do our best. And we provide a social service. So really, the motivation for me in the politics and for me to stand up against those people is the rage that I feel inside for all the things which are happening, which don't need to happen.
I mean, you're not afraid of a fight, are you? I mean, what I take away from this, along with all the other things, is, your line that I'm a big fan of my race, the human race. I mean, that speaks to a lot, and I think aspects of your empathy with people certainly comes across, Neil. And that's really rather refreshing in a representative in Parliament.
Well, my history of it is I was involved in family court myself back in 2007, right the way up to 2018. Learned a hell of a lot about the system. And then I came into contact with fathers who were not seeing their children either at that point.
Yeah.
Like I was with my daughter today. We had a lovely day. And I've got a young son as well. He's 15, almost 15. He's 15 months. But so I sort of was immersed in this world of people fighting to see their children. What then happened, I started doing work, all voluntary. Go to court. If you couldn't afford a lawyer, I'd go to court with you. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm called a Mackenzie friend. So I go there, support you. I still do it now. But then what happened then, roughly when I got elected in 2016, by 2017, the most of the cases I was getting were mums and dads, but particularly mothers, who were losing their children to the state. And I always thought if children were taken into care by the state, there was a good reason for it. And what I became aware of outrageously is so often that it's not a good reason. And again, I think we're back to the old chestnut of money, because these children are worth lots of money in care. And
per capita.
Oh man, I tell you.
That's some great information, and I look forward to following your progress. And the election is what, May 6th?
They say it's May the 6th. I read today from a lobbying firm that it may be delayed. Whatever, you know, I want it on May the 6th if it's delayed. At the end of the day, the First Minister is Mark Drakeford. People are starting to call him Mark Dunford, because May the 6th, he's getting done by us.